I promise not every message is going to hit on all of these hot button issues, but today we're going to hit some hot button issues. And I just want you to know that that's coming down the pike. Also, just from the posture in which we're addressing it. So this sermon series has been about low-key, best sermon ever, no cap. I still have no idea what it means, but hopefully you're learning something from it. The whole concept really is just about like, what if we were able to sit at the feet of Jesus and just hear what he's talking about and do something with it, right? What if we were actually to listen and obey what Jesus is saying? I think that we would be in a much better place. And so leading into this, Jesus has been healing people, and word is spreading, and everybody is kind of starting to gather together around Jesus. And as they do so, he takes them up on the mountainside and begins to teach them with authority and power. And before we get into what today's message is, I'd like you to just do some audience participation with me. And even if you're watching at home online, you can still do this. We just can't monitor your success. So if you could just take your hand and place it in the air. And then if you can do one of these things for me. And then stick it behind your back. Do you remember this as a kid? Anybody else? I promise. What does this do? Gets us off the hook, right? Like, I didn't really mean it. There was really like, nah. It doesn't matter what I said on the front side as long as my fingers were crossed on the back side. And we live, believe it or not, in a society that is kind of commitment averse. Have you noticed that? Like commitment, and I don't mean to step on your toes here, but I might do that. Like, have you ever been asked, like, hey, we got this thing coming up, could you be there? And you're like, I don't know, I need to check my calendar and see what's going on. But what you're really thinking is, like, there ain't no chance, but I'm not going to let them know that. And so we just kind of let that commitment slide. Like, appreciate it. I mean, I saw this commercial about a guy that was given an opportunity. He's like, no, I got to sell my car on Carvana, you know. So we are just really averse to this commitment idea. And it really comes at us in a lot of different ways. Think about like legal contracts where there's loopholes. Maybe those loopholes get hidden in what we call the fine what? The fine print. And these legal contracts are written by people who don't even like to read them. I'm pretty sure of that. I cannot imagine a job on this side of hell that involves reading through all of that content. And worse yet, it makes us out to be a liar, because then they ask us, have you read all the content? Right? Yes. Oh, I'm the only one? Right? We just don't really want to dig into that. It's a hard thing to do. And so this level of commitment, or keeping our promises, faithfulness, is what we're talking about today. So we're going to be in Matthew chapter 5, in what's known as the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' longest recorded message, page 810 in the black Bibles that we provide if you want to follow along there. Last week we hit a good portion of chapter 5, and we focused in on like our relationships with other people as it relates to anger, loving our neighbors, or loving our enemies rather, retaliation. But this week we're hitting these topics of lust, adultery, and keeping our oaths, our promises. And my guess is that as we discuss this, it can be really easy to be offended. Not that, again, we live in a culture that's very easily offended. But I want to preface this with what I think is the intent. So as we've discussed this, Jesus says, you are the light of the world. We also know that Jesus is described as being the light of the world. And it says that the people didn't want to come to the light because they were afraid that their evil deeds would be exposed. But I want us to understand and appreciate what Jesus is saying from maybe a different posture, and that is that when the light is coming to shine into our darkest times, it's not there so much just to wag a finger at us and convict us, but it's actually compelling us to step into something better, right? It's showing us what is maybe causing some pain, some hurt, and causing us now to think about it differently and bringing us into a new world, a new way of thinking. We would call that, we've got one song we've been introducing here called the Jesus Way, but the kingdom way, right? That Jesus is the king of a greater kingdom. And if we can just kind of picture it as like, it's this alternate world, but yet it's the real world. The world that we're living in is the one that's kind of got some issues. And so we're trying to see, like, where's God's kingdom different than the kingdom that we're living in, the kind of world that we're placed in. And so we open up into this topic of lust, chapter 5, verse 27. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. You've heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. This is commandment number 7. You may not even know the Bible, but you probably know a lot of the 10 commandments. Do not commit adultery. Most everybody can tell me this because as I sit down with couples doing their premarital counseling, I usually ask a question, something similar to, like, can you think of any reason that this marriage would not last? And if they share any reason, it's usually this one, adultery. They are unfaithful to me. If they're unfaithful to me, I'm out. Right? And so we can understand this, but we also need to understand that we live in a world that is full of not just adultery, but many different ways of being unfaithful. And so Jesus, as he's getting into this, as he's doing throughout the Sermon on the Mount, there's 6 illustrations of how his kingdom is different. How he's driving really to the heart of the issue and not just a symptom of the issue. We know this because we go to the doctor. Like, we don't want to just kind of somehow temporarily avoid some symptoms. We actually want to get to the cause of it so we don't have to continue dealing with it. And so Jesus is sharing with them the true cause. You've heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Lustful intent. Your version may say something different than that, but the English Standard Version that I just read has this word that I think packs a huge amount of meaning, intent. Right? It's not a sin to look and be tempted. Right? It's not a sin if something just happens to catch your eye. Right? You read a message and you go, right? Not a sin. Right? The sin is when it becomes intentful, willful decision. To continue to think about it, to mull it over in your head, to fantasize about it, or to look intently into the situation consistently, like you're exposing yourself to that. So let me ask you a quick question. And if I was a more demented pastor, I would do this and ask you to actually follow along with me. I'm not going to do that today. I'm just going to say, hey, if you've ever struggled with lust or lustful intent, in your mind, raise your hand. In your mind, right? Because I don't want to set you up for success like that long contract. And then if I were more demented, I would say, well, how many of you still have your hand? How many of you still have both eyes? And we wonder, what's Jesus' position on this whole thing? He's like, guess what? If your right eye causes you to sin, your dominant eye, gouge it out, cut it out. Gruesome picture, right? Okay, Jesus, like you're a different kind of preacher. Didn't know where we were going there today. We're gouging out eyes. If your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off. Right? It's better to lose those members of your body that they be thrown into hell than your entire body be thrown into hell. So there's kind of this question here. Is you think that Jesus takes adultery seriously? I think so. Lust, right? Not just the act, physically the act of adultery, but even the mental picture of adultery. The grabbing a hold of it from our intent, our willful intent internally in our body. And there could be this mindset that we enter into that says, well, I didn't actually do it, so it's not that bad, right? But that's not what Jesus is saying. If you even look lustfully. Now, I know that when this was written, it was written with the idea that we're talking to people who had a male-dominant position in their world. And the women didn't really have a role in what was going on here. And so men We need to make sure we're controlling our eyes, our thoughts, right? That we're not looking at a woman lustfully. But we know, and we could say with all honesty today, that women have much the same issue, especially as pornography has increased usage amongst both men and women. Women probably rising in usage way faster than men. Men have always had an issue, it seems, most. But it's becoming more prevalent. But it's not always an image, is it? It's not always a picture. It's not always a video. Sometimes it's just that movie that kind of sparks that intrigue. Right? It's the song that we listen to that has some words that are, well, somewhat questionable. And we begin to receive it as this is okay. Our world, the kingdom that we're birthed into, tells us it's okay. And so we just kind of keep on going through those motions, receiving those kind of things. But Jesus says, nah, not with my world. We're going to cut that off. So I want to tell you a little bit about myself, because I don't feel like I can ever touch on this situation without ever receiving the first stone. Right? Because when I was a young man, I was exposed to pornography. And I can tell you it wrecked my life in a lot of ways, in ways that I'm still dealing with the consequences of. Right? There are things like there are images, there are TV shows, there are music songs that as soon as I hear that, my mind goes back. And I'm not getting any younger, let me tell you, but it goes back a long way. I can't remember what happened yesterday, but I can remember what tripped that emotional response in my brain. And I think that there's a reason that Paul, when he's addressing the church in Corinth, which had some big-time issues with this topic, he said that all of their sin is outside of your body, but he who sins sexually sins against himself. Like, our brains kind of burn those images into our life, and they create an emotional response. And so that was there for me, and I can tell you that it not just made a personal impact for me and my ability to connect with other women or to see them as they were created, images of God, right? But to see them as something that was for my personal pleasure, my benefit. And it also came into my marriage, right? There's this thought like, hey, as soon as I get married and as soon as that's off the table, like it's going to be golden. Let me just tell you, that's a myth. Right? If you've got those issues going in, you'll probably continue to have those issues. And so when it comes to lust, when it comes to those things, like what willful decisions are we going to make? Now, let me tell you, before you go off grabbing a machete and trying to chop off your hand or trying to gouge out an eye, like even if Jesus were literal, like that's probably not going to solve your issue. Right? But Jesus is speaking in hyperbole. The whole idea is to get your attention, to get the attention of his audience. This is such a big deal. If it's causing an issue, gouge out your eye, because it's way better if you live your life without your eye than if your whole body is destined for hell. It's way better that you cut off your hand than if your whole body is destined for hell. He's taking it serious. Hell is this picture of a valley that was by Jerusalem that a lot of kings and therefore a lot of people in Israel would go and worship false gods. And one of the ways that they would worship is that they would offer their children in a sacrifice of fire. They would kill and burn their children to these false gods. It's crazy. But the concept, again, is meant to grab our attention. If you behave in such a way, that's what you're destined for. And you don't want to be destined for that. And so if there's a part of you that's leading you that direction and you can't get control of it, cut it off and throw it in. Right? So we continue to read on because I want you to see this from Jesus himself. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out, throw it away, for it is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. For it is better for you to lose one of your members than your whole body to go to hell. The image is that of a stumbling block. To put something in front of you that's actually going to make you trip, or somebody else does that for you. Right? And these things, these issues, these thoughts that you're meditating on, these thoughts that are leading you astray are actually a stumbling block. I want you to picture like somebody putting a string across or a rope that is meant to trip you as you come into the room, right? But think of it also like some of you might be hunters, like you're putting out a trap. You're setting this line, and on the other side of that is a pitfall. A pit that you've dug out that has little spikes in it so that if you fall in, like you're going to be tumbling to your death. Right? This is the imagery that's kind of being conveyed here. And if it wasn't bad enough, like we've probably seen the line. We know, like, hey, this is the line, don't cross it. If you cross it, you're going into certain death. And yet we don't pick up the line, we don't remove it, and we stumble on it. And I think so many times we also are guilty of putting the line there. And as we put that line there, we know it's there. But we hit it anyway. And we plummet to our own demise. So the response from Jesus is, I love you too much to let you fall into that pit. I love you too much to let you get caught up in lust and the desires of your heart. I love you too much to let you become the victim of that. But I also love the people in your life more than that. Right? They were created in my image. They're valuable to me. Love God and love others. And so there's nothing really loving about lusting after other people. It removes their value, their image, and puts them as an object for us. It's a different perspective, right? Lust. Divorce. I don't know how Jesus does this. It would have been really interesting to sit at his feet and go, okay, did he really unpack this at all? Or did he just say these few words and be like, all right, next topic. Just 2 verses. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that everyone who divorces his wife, except on the ground of sexual immorality, makes her commit adultery. And whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. The NIV has an interesting way of directing this, and it's like you actually cause the woman to commit adultery by doing this. You cause her to do this by separating. Now that grounds of divorce, it was there. We can go into Matthew 19, which we're not going to spend a lot of time there today, but Jesus unpacks this idea a little bit more so when the teachers of the law and the Pharisees come and try to trap him. And they say, Jesus, how do you view this? What is okay? A reasonable reason to get divorced. Something you probably wouldn't know unless you dug in a little bit deeper is that within the Jewish community, there were 2 major camps when it came to a passage of the Old Testament, Deuteronomy 24. Deuteronomy 24, Moses gives the people of Israel permission to get a divorce for just cause, right? And so a divorce in their world would look like, hey, I'm going to write this up in front of 2 witnesses and sign it. I'm going to give it to the woman, and she can leave now. She's on her own. She's free to leave. She's free to remarry. She can go. A woman didn't have the same rights as a man. She didn't have to agree on the divorce. He could just give it to her. He would have to sign off on the divorce. It had to be something that was from his camp, like from his decision. And so they would enter into this with 2 main thoughts. Thought number 1 is any and every cause that the man thought was justifiable. And so it could be like, hey, you burned supper tonight. See you later. I'm done. Right? It could be like, hey, you didn't clean the house, take care of the kids, because they definitely had some domestic responsibilities as the women in the house. It could be simply because he found somebody he thought was better. Not that we see that in our culture today, right? That, hey, there's somebody better, somebody more attractive, somebody who meets my needs. Like God just happened to put them there. I don't believe that for a fact. That God would put somebody there to tempt you away from your commitment that you've already made. Right, but as we enter into this, the question is really, Jesus, what do you believe? Where are you at in this? Can we get a divorce for any reason? Or is it just for unfaithfulness? Well, in Matthew 19, he takes us back to Genesis. Here's kind of a cool thing. Like some of you may be struggling with like, what do I believe about faith? What do I believe about Scripture? Like maybe I can believe Jesus and the things following that, but the Old Testament, I don't know. I don't really get that. Jesus is constantly quoting the Old Testament stuff, and he's going back to the origin story in Genesis, because what really matters is what the author's intended meaning was. That was something I learned in Bible college when I'm looking at text. What does the author want me to get from this? It's kind of like in our families, mom and dad say do a certain thing. It doesn't really matter how I took that, what I thought they meant. It's really what they meant. I'm not going to get judged on my intent of what I thought they said, right? But I'm actually going to adhere to what they wanted. So if in Genesis we're given the pattern, the story of creation, then what was the intent behind it? Well, man shall leave his father and mother, cling to his wife, and the two will become one flesh, right? To join together, to marry together, flesh upon flesh, has a very powerful image, right? That they become one flesh. Now, if you pull those two people apart, what happens to flesh? It rips and it tears and it bleeds, and it's not good. And I know as a child of divorce, and I know that we have children of divorce that are here with us today, right? I know that those of you who have gone through a divorce and dealt with the agony of that, right? Even if you were a child and it was the choice was out of your hands, you still dealt with the consequences of that choice, that flesh being torn apart. Even if you were hurt in the process, and to leave would mean I'm not going to sit in that hurt and I'm going to refuse that, it still comes with pain, right? It still comes with pain. And so I want you to know, as somebody who's gone through it, right, that we want to go with you through the pain, through the struggle. We know that it hurts, but we also know that there's hope and there's healing on the other side of that through Jesus Christ. Right? We want you to know that even though that was what was done to you, or that was a choice that you made, or it was a series of choices that were made, that's not the life that Jesus intends for you. And so he's shining a light so that he can bring you to a better life, a kingdom way of life. And so we dig into that. Also, we should know that in the culture that they were surrounded in, like we talked about the Jewish stance, but there was also the Greeks. Now, Greeks, they had a very loose opinion of marriage. And when I say loose, like it was almost expected. Like it was welcomed and expected that men would be unfaithful in their marriages. They would probably have prostitutes. Matter of fact, some of the temples that you could go to, you would have a temple prostitute, and that money funded the temple ministry. How crazy is that, right? But as we read about some of these New Testament churches that exist, especially in Revelation in the churches, these are some of the things that they were dealing with, this Greek culture of promiscuity as they would relate to the marriage. But then they would also, in addition to their wives who had a certain status, they would have concubines, existed within the Jewish culture too, that these would be like lesser than wives. So it was all sorts of messed up. Now, the Romans had a pretty high view of marriage. The Romans are the ones that now are oppressing the Jewish people. They had a pretty high view of marriage until they got around the Greeks, and the Greeks kind of ruined it for them too. And this is the setting that we're seeing this. Now, I say that because what does this look like in the U.S. today? Do we have a high view of marriage? I would say we don't. We no longer have a high view of marriage. Marriage is something that can be dissolved for any and every cause. Irreconcilable differences, right? Not a high view of marriage. We have such a low view of marriage that many of our teens and young adults say, what's the purpose of marriage? I am not going to get married because it didn't work for grandma and grandpa, it didn't work for mom and dad. My life was wrecked because of this. And so, hey, if I want to have a relationship and be able to walk away without any no harm, no foul, I just won't get married, right? And I can have all the benefits and none of the commitment. I told you before, commitment can be a bit of an issue, right? So what would it look like in our culture today if we had a high view of marriage, a high view of men and women in our lives? Not just the ones that we're married to or the ones that we're dating, but of all people. That we actually love them the way that Christ loved the church. Man, I think that would be a game changer. I think that would shine a light if we would just bring the faithfulness of God into our lives, and we would learn to be men and women who are faithful. Now let me punctuate this by this last little section. Verse 33. And again you have heard it was said to those of old, you shall not swear falsely, but shall perform to the Lord what you have sworn. But I say to you, do not take an oath at all, neither by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not take an oath by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than this comes from evil. Think about this and think about the faithfulness of God. When God says that he's going to do something, God does something. When Jesus, who gives us the personification of God, he became flesh. When he said he was going to do something, he did something. He followed it up. It would probably be something that a few generations ago we would hear somebody say, like, they are a man of their word, right? I don't need a contract because I know that when they say it, they're going to do everything in their power to live up to it. What would it look like if church, if we were men and women who had the faithfulness of Jesus in our life? And other people would know, like, when we say we're going to do something, we're actually going to do it. I think that would be a game changer in the world around us, right? What happens when somebody else isn't faithful to us? Do we look for the loophole, or do we continue to be faithful even in their unfaithfulness? Because that's the kind of faith that Jesus exhibited. That's the kind of faith that God gave to us, right? Even when you're unfaithful, I will still be faithful. I will keep my promises. No fingers crossed, no fine print. I will be faithful. And so we continue to come back to that kind of faith. So here's how it applies, right? Some of you are business people, and you have contracts. You have business dealings. And there's probably somebody in the room who's been unfaithful to their contracts, right? You create the whole contract in a way that gives you an out. Some of you, that's how you view marriage, right? I'm going to say yes until they do something that irritates me, and then I'm going to say no. And you in your mind have already created an out in the contract, right? You're engaged in this relationship, this fantasy. There's no commitment, right? It's all about you. It's all about your pleasure. It's not about viewing them with a lens that they were created in the image of God, that they are precious and loved. They are somebody's daughter, somebody's son, somebody's brother or uncle or aunt or sister, right? They're precious. But what lust does is it removes that identity. What divorce does is it removes that commitment, that faithfulness that we're supposed to be living in. Now, I also want us to understand as we're sitting in this, that sexual immorality is not the only grounds for divorce, right? There's other things that are talked about. The whole idea, the intent is faithfulness. The intent is, if we go to Ephesians chapter 5 and Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, he actually talks about like this love and respect thing. He also talks about submission and sacrifice, but it's meant to be mutual sacrifice, mutual submission. The two are interdependent of one another. It's supposed to resemble Christ and his church. Love as Christ loved sacrificially, right? Respect, submit as Christ and the church, right? There's a picture given, and we're supposed to resemble that in the world that we've been placed in. When other people look at your life and your lustful intent or lack thereof, do they see Christ? When they look at your marriage, do they see Christ and his love and commitment to the church? When you sign a contract, is your yes simply yes and then your no, no, and you are a person of your word? Do they see the faithfulness of Jesus in your life? This is what we're really driving towards. This is the hope that we want other people to see in us. And so in your business dealings, will you be a person of integrity, even when others aren't? In your relationships, will you put marriage and commitment in a high honor? And maybe a harder next step for a lot of us to take is, what are we willing to cut out of our life? I can tell you that in my own personal life, I've had to make some hard choices, and I'm going to give you some things that I think would be beneficial to you. I read a book a while back. It's called Every Man's Battle. And Every Man's Battle, there's a couple of things that kind of stood out to me. One is that we need to starve the sumo sex drive. So if you don't know what a sumo is, just picture a really big guy in a really large diaper, right? You just feed him and he keeps getting bigger, and he keeps getting bigger. And so in order to starve that sex drive, you have to stop feeding it, right? What are some of the things we do to feed it? The TV shows we watch, the movies, the books that we read, the social media content that we take in, the people that we hang out with, right? There are lots of things that we can expose ourselves to that continues to feed the sex drive. It continues to make it bigger. And one of the things, if we have Jesus' high call, is I need to cut some things out of my life. There might be some media that needs to go. There might need to be some friendships or relationships that need to go because I have a high view of what God wants purity to look like in my life. A high view of what it looks like to honor and respect the person that I'm going to marry, and also a high view of the person that I'm not going to marry, and somebody else is going to be marrying that person. I've got a high view of that too. Right, so we starve the sumo. We also learn to bounce our eyes. This is important because of the intent process, right? It's not a sin to see. It's a sin to stay focused. It's a sin to meditate upon that, to let it capture our thoughts and our fantasies. And so we continue to sit there, and then it becomes sin. But if we learn to bounce our eyes, sometimes that's like seeing that thing and then just, whoop, over here, buddy, over here, right? Sometimes it's cutting those things out of our life so that we're not drawn naturally to them. A real life thing that I've had to do with this, we've at times had different cable providers that say, hey, just as a retention thing, we're going to give you a free 3 months or 6 months of the premium channels. And I say, no, you won't. Right? No, you won't. I don't trust myself with that content coming into my house. Right? There are certain apps I don't have on my phone because I know that if that's there, it can be a crutch. Right? I know that can be a stumbling block to me. I've had to make some of those decisions. Some of you need accountability brought into your life, right? There are softwares that help you with that. Covenant Eyes is one that I'll mention. Covenant Eyes is for your phone, it's for your computer, and basically it flags the content that is questionable. And then it sends a report to whomever you choose as an accountability partner, and they say, what's this? Now, it's only helpful in two ways. Number one is that you have to be honest with the struggle that you're facing. If you're not willing to be honest, it won't help you. If you're super smart and you know how to circumvent this thing, it's not going to help you. Right? If you hop on another device, it's not going to help you. Right? But this is here if you honestly want to strive to get better, to take what's in the dark and bring it to the light. And so I would encourage you to make some of those choices. What next step do you need to make? What are you going to cut from your life? Are you going to pursue the life of integrity, of faithfulness, of bringing things to the light? Or are you going to continue to deal in the darkness? Wrestle with those things. Now, if you're dealing with something that we just talked about, whether that's lust or commitment in a relationship, we want you to know, you're not what you've done or what's been done to you, right? Because of the grace of Jesus Christ, He has promised something so much better for you. And that's exactly why He wants to draw you into a better life. And so we're challenging you to do that. If you would like prayer this morning, we're going to have some people up here by the stage that want to pray for you and with you, to help guide you in this journey. If you have something that you're dealing with and you want to have a private conversation, we can set up time to talk. And I just want you to know that there is a God who loves you and wants so much better for you in your life. And He is faithful. You can trust His promises. Will we also be men and women who are faithful? Will you pray with me? Father, we thank you so much for being a faithful and loving God, because we know there are so many times where we are not faithful, where we do not honor the commitments that we've made, not in our businesses, not with our schooling, not with our friend group, definitely not with these legal contracts with other companies. And we need to be men and women of integrity. Integrity that is seen in our life when we say yes, that we're going to do something, we do everything in our power to uphold that. When we say no, we mean no. It's a firm no. Right? But we're driving to be faithful in our relationships, in our commitments, and we're willing to make sacrifices because we see that you have a high value on our life, a high value for our heart. You want to capture that, and you want it to compel us to better choices. So, Father, help us to lay our heart before you And would you just examine it with your light? Help us to see where it is that we don't measure up, and to seek you, to seek your goodness, and to live that kind of kingdom life. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.